Oh, Bev started recording already, so I've got to behave myself from now on. So yes, anybody joining, we are recording and transcribing. We will share this on YouTube, but just within the LGE+ community. So if you'd rather not be on camera, that's your choice. But if you do speak, we will be recording you. There are a few people who've already expressed interest in hearing what Karen's got to say, but can't be here today. So we know that there's customers for the recording already. Karen, as we haven't met before, just to let you know, I'm blind. So if you notice either my guide dog appearing on camera or my speech software intruding, something technologically has gone slightly astray, but that's why I'm not making full eye contact with the camera. And I won't necessarily follow all of your slides, but Bev is here to assist me with anything visual behind the scenes. So
smashing, thank you.
That just explains who I am.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. How many people are you expecting, Kate? Do you know?
Well, it's always tricky to tell because we invite over 400.
Sure.
And we usually get somewhere between 20 and 50 at each of these sessions. It does vary depending on all sorts of factors, but we also don't always know because we have a good chunk of people who accept the invitation. We have some who tentatively indicate they're attending, and then we have some we just never hear from until they either show or don't. So, Bev, where are we up to with numbers, would you say, compared to where indications of definites? And people possibly pop in and out. So
yeah, sure.
I'll just let Bev answer my question about numbers and then I will get started.
Didn't realise I was on mute.
Right.
I'm just double checking how many we've got now.
13 we've got now.
No, sorry, how many responded?
Sorry.
Oh, a lot more than that.
I think we're about, last count, we was about 40 something.
Yes, so we are expecting more people to possibly pop in. But the intention of these unplugged sessions is that they are quite relaxed and that people can choose to dip in throughout the hour. So I might start doing my usual spiel. So for anybody who hasn't attended Leading Greater Essex Unplugged before, in fact, including Karen in particular as our speaker, this is the opportunity for those who've taken part in our whole systems leadership learning programme, Leading Greater Essex, to come together as an alumni community, which we call LGE+. So stuff that's beyond and above what you've learned within the Leading Greater Essex space. And I'm just going to shush my tech that's bothering me. There we go. And we call it Unplugged because it is supposed to be a relaxed mealtime conversation where we hear from somebody inspiring that either some of the alumni or I have come up with as an idea. I am an alumnus myself. I was part of LGE 2022 as a participant. Having been the creator back in 2016, I also chose to come back in while I was on secondment into the NHS. So I've been around. But we come up with people that we think would be interesting to hear from. And we invite them to be here with us today to tell us their story. And I'm delighted today to welcome Karen, who will introduce herself and tell us her perception of what being a systems leader is all about in her world. So over to you, Karen, and people will turn up and do use the chat, the hands raising, and our audience as you wish. I will turn my camera off and mute. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for having me here. Beverly, I think I'm set up to share. I just tested whether I can share the screen, okay, which I want to do. Do you know, is there scope for us to have breakout groups?
Ooh, without having asked in advance, no, it might be tricky for us to do that at short notice. And we also don't know how the numbers are going to work with people popping in and out.
No, that's fine. I just on Zoom, it's quite easy to do it at the last minute. So I just wondered whether Microsoft has the functionality for that.
Bev could, but I'm not sure without having a bit of a practice run. We've done it with this particular group because we've got lots of people from lots of different platforms. So
lovely. All right. Well, if it's all right with everybody, I think I'm going to start sharing my screen and just talking you through some of what I'm taking the opportunity to talk about. I'm really delighted to be asked to come and talk about my journey, and I think how I wanted to do that really was to talk to you about what we've learned about courageous leadership. And the importance of courage and fearlessness, in fact, in the way that we do systems leadership. So I'm going to share my screen. That's going to mean, I think, that Oh, no, that's really annoying because you've got it as I don't want to do it like that. Let me stop that. I want to share it so that you can just see what I can see. Let's have a look. Bear with me. So why is it doing it like that? Windows, here we go. This will be a better way to do it. So I just wanted to talk to you about what we've learned. We've been doing a piece of innovation for Sport England, actually. Can people see my slides now, all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Smashing. That's great. Let me go to the first slide. Oh, go back to the first slide. So I just want to talk to you. I've got a presentation that takes just under an hour talking about fearless leadership and what we've learned about courage and leading in complexity, really. And throughout this presentation, what I will try and do is weave in the journey that I've been on. I'm going to do it in such a way where I won't be able to see if you've got your hands up. So I'm going to be asking you if you've got questions or comments that you want to make at all at any point. You just unmute and say them out loud, and I'm more than happy to be interrupted. I'm not always happy to be interrupted, but I'm more than happy today to be interrupted because I'm really conscious that the invitation was to be quite informal. I want to show you, though, some of the formal learning that we've got, and then explain in a more informal way how that's landed with me and the leadership style that we use, and that I particularly lean into with my role. So just a little bit about me. That's me and my little dog, and I suppose the takeaway that from me to you would be that I kind of started out in a role in the public sector right at the beginning of my career. I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to work in a for-profit environment. I wanted to feel like the work that I was doing was going to make the world a better place. That's kind of how I grew up. I grew up reading Karl Marx at 15, thinking that I needed to know how to be changing the world that I lived in. I could see injustice. I felt injustice right from a young age. I was the child of an Irish immigrant in the southeast, growing up at a time when I guess. For example, when I went to Brownies, I couldn't go to the Sunday service and get my badge associated with that because I wasn't from a Church of England background. I was from a Catholic background, so I felt different from a really young age, and I wanted to make the world fairer and more just. So throughout my career, I have always chosen the path of public service over private profit, I suppose. I need to say that up front, really. The quote that gets me out of bed in the morning is a systems change quote, and actually that probably says a lot about who I am. I am a bit of I'm a bit of a kind of philosophical nerd, I suppose. This quote brought me up short. And I use this every day, this quote, even if it's only to determine which of the two meetings that are clashing in my diary that I should go to. And it's by an amazing strategist, amazing strategist. I'm going to leave it at that. She's an activist. She's lots of other things as well. But she talks about, in her book, Emergent Strategy, she talks about the way that we should do the work. And she says, you're always practicing something. You're either practicing upholding the world as it is, or you're practicing shifting into the world as you want it to be. And for me, this invitation to create the world you want to see, I think sums up probably my whole career, and why I'm doing work in the way that I'm doing it. What we've learned about where we stand at the moment as system leaders and the change that's needed for the future that we've got coming is that there are two foundational premises. One is that we're living in times of extreme change that call for courage, and the challenges for us really in that are how do we stay with that, and how do we use the disruption of some of that, because it is, climate change, all that kind of stuff is disruptive to the norm. So how do we use that disruption to find new ways of collaborating and organising? And then the second of the two foundational premises is that many of the issues that we deal with are caused by a gap between what we know and then what we do. So we know that things need to be different, but what we do is more of the same. And I suppose, I mean, I don't need to say any more than that. I'm going to come back to this a couple of times during this presentation, I suppose. The work that we need to do, that we've learned over the last sort of 7 or 8 years of the innovation work that we've been doing in the most deprived communities on behalf of organisations like Sport England and others, what we've learned is that the work is about feeling and sensing. So stepping into the unknown. If you're going to do innovation, you need to be able to step into the unknown, even when that feels scary. And that's where the whole fearlessness and courage bit comes in. You need to be able to sit with the trouble rather than sidestepping it. You need to understand that it's not what you do, often it's the way that you do it. So that whole bit about purpose-driven practices. And this is really where complex system leadership comes in, that everything is connected. So being able to make sense of the complex interrelationships that exist within systems. Interestingly, this morning, as I was getting ready for work, I think one of the correspondents on the Today programme for the BBC mentioned polycrisis about 8 times, and it rang in my ears because it's not a term you hear all the time, but it's one you're beginning to hear more of. And the definition of polycrisis is that there are simultaneous occurrences of several catastrophic events all at once. And they were talking about it in relation to a part of the world where there is system breakdown, and that's particularly impacting on women and girls. But in this sense, what I mean it by, I guess, is ultimately that we're experiencing the breakdown of several of our systems all at once. We're seeing the financial, political and social systems around the world being under pressure and challenge, and some would argue breakdown. We're seeing a shift in climate, which is resulting in climate catastrophe. It's leading to impacts on nature. There is the sixth mass extinction well underway, and we are seeing the breakdown of typical weather patterns, all sorts of the loss of all sorts of species. There was something the other day about a particular kind of wading seabird that's no longer in evidence in Europe and hasn't been seen for over 30 years, hasn't been defined as extinct just yet, but we're on the brink of yet another another species of bird being declared extinct. We are living at a time where the impact of all of that then means that we have a human well-being crisis and breakdown as well. And actually, there is an invitation to see all of this through the lens of system thinking because of the complexity involved in this concept of a polycrisis. How do we as public servants, how do we as leaders turn and face the grief and the chaos and the complexity of dealing with all of that? And I want to deliberately, for a second, bring you all down. Okay, why should we be courageous? If you needed any more of an example, there was one this time last year. It was just slightly later. It was during Christmas and New Year, when a 2-year-old boy died of starvation, curled up, and was found dead next to his dead father. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about this now. And I'm deliberately inviting you to step into some of the discomfort that comes with this example. So Bronson Battersby was a 2-year-old boy. He was in the care of the local authority. His father was given custody of him, intermediate custody of him, temporary custody of him between Christmas and New Year. And his father died. Second day into looking after him over Christmas and New Year, his father died of a heart attack. The social worker had tried to arrange to come in to see Bronson being cared for by his dad, and several times during Bronson's last few days knocked on the door of the flat trying to get in. When she eventually got the police to escort her to break down the door to get in, it was too late, and Bronson was found having starved to death, curled up in the legs of his father. That little boy died within 6 foot of neighbours. There were people above him and below him. There was a system that knew he was in danger and was trying to get access to him. But in fact, there was a complete system and I would argue social failure where that little boy died because we have a system that can't deal with the depth of the issues it's facing, and we know this. We know this. I can't imagine how that social worker will spend the rest of her career feeling, knowing that when she visited him twice, he was still alive and in desperate need. I don't know how the police who opened the flat and found him curled up in his dad's legs, I don't know how they will go home to their kids. I don't know how we as humans deal with the impact of really knowing that this kind of thing is not unusual. But it's the courage that we need to face this and say, what do we need to do about it, that I think I want to speak to you about. One of the influences on my career and on I would argue on my development from a really young age was Archbishop Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and all the work that was done in South Africa challenging apartheid. And he spoke very eloquently and said there comes a point where we need to just stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I would argue, even more strongly than that, we need to look at why our systems are designed to push people into the river in order for us to need them to rescue them, to get them back out again. You know, we know, and it comes back to that knowing and doing gap. We know that things need to be different, but what we don't do them in a different way. Now, Otto Scharmer, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, he's a professor at MIT. He is a change theorist. He says, what if we use this disruption as an opportunity to let go of everything that isn't essential in our life and in our work and in our institutional routines? How might we reimagine how we live and work together? How might we reimagine the basic structures of our communities? The invitation at this time of severe disruption of polycrisis is to let go of how things have been in the past because they're not working. And to reimagine, and this is a really important bit, you know, along with courage needs to be an activation of the imagination. You know, we need to be able to envisage how things could be different rather than sit in the discomfort that they're not right now. So what we've learned about fearless leadership, and this is what I'm going to talk to you about for the next few minutes really, is that change is in a job, that we need to notice the fear and lean into it. We need to lead from purpose. We need to find a flock and find connection. We can't do it by ourselves. We need to nurture courage, and that it's all about the way that we practice. And I'm going to go into those in a bit more detail. But I want to talk first of all about change being an inner job. And this is Theory U. This is Otto Scharmer's work. I just spoke about him. He's the professor from MIT. And he said he did an extensive study of system leaders and of chief execs of big global companies, corporate, you know, international corporate companies. And he looked at how change happens. And he said that there is a process that happens, which are the things that go through the yellow U shape that you can see. And then the bit in the middle, curiosity, open mind, compassion, open heart, and courage, open will. He said these are the bits, this is the inner state that leaders need to cultivate if they're going to take organizations, systems, countries, you know, sectors. If they're going to take them through change, they need to hold this inner state. And he said this was the one thing that good system leaders, good change leaders had in common. They had an open mind where they invited in curiosity. They had an open heart where they were able to be compassionate and empathize with a range of views. And then they had an open will in that they were prepared to lean into courage and do things differently, even if there wasn't an evidence base for what they were about to do. So I'm not going to talk too much more about Theory U. I on a personal level, since I came across this 10 years ago, this is now the way I live most of my life. You know, I step away from doing things as I've always done them. I try and see things through an open mind and with fresh eyes. I will try to understand a range of views other than my own and have an open heart, and really lean into the feelings that come with the work, not just the thoughts. And then I am prepared to behave differently. In fact, I argue that we must behave differently. I'm prepared to let go of what we've done in the past. I'm prepared to understand what my purpose here as a leader is. And then I work really hard as I come back up the U of change to let things come, to prototype things, to try them with a lightness and a kind of curiosity, and then to step into the change by embodying the change that needs to be seen. And as a leader of an organisation, I lead a community benefit society and a cooperative called the Active Wellbeing Society, and these are our organisational values. We speak to our staff once a month in a one-to-one, in a formal one-to-one with all of our staff, and we invite them to reflect for us each month on how they've demonstrated those values in practice. How have they demonstrated an open mind? In what ways have they demonstrated an open heart? And how have they shown that they're prepared to behave differently in order to serve the communities we work with in a better and more impactful way.
Karen, sorry,
yeah, of course.
You. A few people have put in the chat that they can't see the screen and the slides.
Okay.
The slides aren't moving on.
Can everybody?
They're displaying fine for me, so
yeah, fine for me as well.
Don't know.
I'm going to stop sharing for a minute.
What magic settings I've got in place, but I do seem to be working.
So if I pause and then reshare it. Let's see what people can see now. Let me just reshare that. Windows. I need to do it with sound. Can people now see a slide that's got a hawk in the background and some values on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can, but I could before.
Can anybody that
I couldn't before, but can now. So it's solved for me what I couldn't do before.
Lovely. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. That's really helpful. If that happens again, will you holler up again?
Yes, I will do.
Lovely, thank you. That's great. So I'm going to move on now to the next slide, actually. Normally, if I could see you all, I'd ask you who's heard of Myron's Maxims. I'm going to assume that at least some of you have. And Myron Rogers is a systems change leader, I guess. He's an author. He's a leader of system change, and he's done a body of work called Myron's Maxims, and they are some kind of guides, if you like, to how system change happens. For me, if I hadn't heard of these before COVID, I'm not sure on a personal or a professional level I'd have got through the kind of challenge of COVID certainly in terms of my organisation and our work, but I think as well on a professional level. But I just want to quickly run through these because I find them really useful and I lean into these on a daily basis. I don't know how many of you can hear my dog in the background, but he's decided right now is when he wants to tell you that he likes Myron's Maxims as well. Pips, enough. So the first one is people own what they help to create. And I don't know how many of you have ever tried to, thank you, Pippins. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to put in like a playground in a new community, or however, excuse me for just a second, let me just get my dog. Thanks, Pippins. Come here, come and sit up here and you can look with me. So people own what they help to create. That's all about making sure that you've got buy-in from the community. And I imagine, when I think about this one, I imagine Annika Rice and turning up, you know, in the program that she used to do, where she used to come out of a helicopter and there was all these community buildings or, you know, community projects that she would work in. They never got vandalized. You know, the community bought into them. They'd often been responsible for writing into the program. Challenge Annika, it was called. I'm definitely of a certain era. I'm sure most of you are far too young to have been alive when the program was on. But it was a really good demonstration of where the community are bought into something from the beginning, they will own it. And this works with teams, this works with organisations, it's not just with communities. People own what they help to create. And it's a beautiful invitation to remember to collaborate all the way through systems change. The next one is related to this, really, which is that real change happens in the real work. So you can write a policy about it, you can have a strategic plan, but actually on the front line where the work happens, whether that's, you know, the medical secretaries who are desperately shielding GPs from you know, an over demand of appointments, or whether it's a leisure centre receptionist you know, who doesn't tell you about the free offer that's going on, whatever, you know, the real work, so the front line where the actual work is happening with actual communities or people, that's where the real change needs to be. And subsequently, the next of Myron's Maxims, those who do the work are the ones that do the change, kind of relates to that as well. So if you want to see things being different, you've got to work with those who are doing the work itself. For me, this next one, Connect the System to More of Itself, was fundamentally what got us through COVID. So we were in a position where we were working largely in Birmingham pre-COVID. We work nationally now, but the bulk of our work was in Birmingham pre-COVID. And some of the officers in Birmingham City Council came to me and said, we really don't know what we're going to do when everything shuts down next week. We don't know how people are going to get fed. And we were equally concerned. We ran a couple of community cafes. We knew that people weren't going to be able to come out to them. How were they going to get their food? And so they said to me, how much food do you think we as a system, we as the council need to buy? Well, the council had, and the system within the council, in terms of its emergency planning, really didn't have a clue how they would even gauge that. But actually, the role that we were able to play was to connect the system to all of the emergency food providers, all of the food surplus providers across the city that we knew of and that we were working with. Together, we came up with a rough estimate that we thought we might need about 10 tonnes of food a week. We decided that because it was COVID, the pressure would get greater. So we thought, let's double it. Let's say we need something around 20 tonnes of food a week. Actually, at its height, we were getting through 50 tonnes of food a week. But the point was, by the time we were at that point where you know, we were on lockdown to such severity that people were experiencing quite significant food poverty, actually the system had joined up better to itself. So the role that we were able to play was almost like a system connector role, and we've continued to play that role for the City Council. We scaffold a food justice network that routinely informs the City Council about where food poverty is and what to do with it. So The next one that I also really love on a personal level is start anywhere but follow it everywhere. And this for me is that moment where, and you see it a lot in projects where people don't want to get going till they've lined everything up. Or we can't get going yet because we haven't done the mapping, or we haven't got everything in place. Actually, the invitation in this one is to start with whatever shows up, to start with whatever energy shows up, to go where the most energy is to start with, but be curious and be prepared to follow it wherever it goes. And this is a mantra by which we do our work in tours. When we work with communities, we may well want to get the community more active, or we may be being paid to perhaps work with them to do some consultation around a new development. But actually, where we start is what's showing up for the community in terms of what do they want, and then we'll follow that, but we'll weave in at some point what we need to talk to them about, or the work we need to do with them as well. And it's a beautiful invitation for people who are nosy like me, I think. And then finally, and this is a really good one, I think, to always have it in the back of your mind, the process that we use to get to the future is the future we get. So if we use a compassionate and collaborative process to get to the future, we will end up in a future that is collaborative and empathic and curious, and it has all the things that we're seeking to achieve in it. If we use a competitive commissioning framework to get to the future, we will get a competitive and fragmented future. And there's a lovely the root word of abracadabra, or the root meaning of abracadabra, the Aramaic original meaning was, as I speak it, so I create it. So that idea that something, which the word we've now come to associate with magic, actually once meant, as I say it, so I create it. And this for me is really closely linked to this one of Myron's maxims, the idea that the minute we speak of it, the minute we intend something to be out loud, we've stepped into the future. That is the future we're beginning to manifest. And I think that's a lovely maxim to kind of hold on to. Related to all of this is the need really to, and you can see hopefully how these read across. So what Myron was talking about is in this next slide, where you've got the blue circle. So that's system leadership and the kind of behaviours that you need when it's far from certain and people are far from agreement. So, how would we tackle homelessness? How do we deal with drug use, for example? Those big, thorny, wicked issues, we used to call them, actually needs some of the things that you've seen on the previous slide from Myron. It means that we need to focus on purpose. It means that we need to be experimental and hold curiosity. We need a range of views. We need to encourage connection and conversation. And ultimately, and most importantly for me on this slide, is that we need to be able to contain anxiety, because there is no definites. When you're dealing with something that's near to certainty and close to agreement, so it's Susan's birthday and we want to make her a birthday cake, then all you need is ordinary management, technical, rational decision making. What kind of cake are we going to make her? Simple structures. Where's our recipe? Effective procedures. Does the oven work? Have we bought all the ingredients? Monitoring, coordination. Am I doing this right? Am I following the recipe? And then providing direction. Okay, here's the cake. How many people do we need to cut it up for? That there is a difference between the skills that we need in ordinary management situations compared with those that we need for systems leadership. And we're dealing with a polycrisis. So I would be arguing, of course, that actually the sorts of things that we need to be focusing on are the things within the blue circle. And Peter Senge, who is a systems theorist, says that knowing that there are no easy answers to truly complex problems, system leaders cultivate the conditions wherein collective wisdom emerges over time through a ripening process that gradually brings about new ways of thinking, acting and being. And you can see the overlap there between open mind, open heart and open will. I think what's lovely about this quote particularly is that system leaders cultivate the conditions wherein collective wisdom emerges. That's my favourite bit of that whole quote. So he's saying that good system leaders understand that it's collective wisdom that takes time to develop, is that's going to get us where we need to be. And I think that ties in really well with what Darwin said, and he's often completely misrepresented. Darwin did not say survival of the fittest. What Darwin actually said was, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, it's the one most adaptable to change. And we are living in times of really complex change. Helen Goulden and from the Young Foundation says that systems don't change unless they're put under undue pressure. And for me, this is the bit, the term undue pressure is the bit where that calls in courage and fearlessness. This is where we have to contain anxiety and we have to know that we have to behave differently. And this is the bit where we need to understand fear and then lean into it. Most of us, when we feel fear, almost instinctively step back away from whatever it is that's causing us fear. Actually, as system leaders, we need to notice that we're feeling fearful and we need to lean into that fear. And Wendell Berry, an American novelist, poet, and environmental activist, has a beautiful quote. And it says, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, when we have come to our real work, and that when we no longer know which way to go, then we have come to our real journey." And what he's inviting in there is that discomfort. And it's really uncomfortable as a leader to say, I don't know where we're going and I don't know what we need to do. You know, in that moment where you invite in the unusual, you're saying, look, what we've done in the past isn't going to work. You're admitting that. Then you're creating space for what has yet to be born. You know, the new ways of seeing things and doing things. It's really difficult to allow yourself as a leader to try something new, actually. I'm going to whiz past that one, and I'm going to ask you just for a second. I'm going to put these quotes in chat in a second, but I want you to face into your fears for a moment, and I just want you to yourself, if you've got a pen and piece of paper, or if not, maybe on your phone or just in your mind, is to answer these two questions. What most scares me about the world right now is ... and what most scares me about what is asked of me right now is ... I'm going to stop sharing and I'll put that in chat. And then I'm going to ask for a couple of brave people in a minute to just perhaps give us a little flavour of the answers to those questions. So I'm going to give you a minute or two. I'm going to stick the questions in chat just right now, if you bear with me. And I'm going to invite you to just take a minute to feel your own fear and answer those questions. I'm just coming now with the put these in chat. I'm also going to take the opportunity to let my dog out of the room so that he can go and harass somebody else. Bear with me. So I've given you a minute or two. Is anybody feeling brave enough to share with us the answer to any of those questions? And if you are feeling brave enough, would you put your camera on and unmute your mic and just tell us what the answer to that is for you? What most scares you? You can do both questions or you can pick one, but tell us what you're answering.
Well, I've put one in chat. So yes, I'm concerned about the impact of the change, I suppose, in government that's coming our way in the US, and the impact that could have in escalation of the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, which could easily get out of control and expand across large areas of the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being brave enough to share that with us. Thank you. Who wants to go next? I'll take 4. If there are as many as brave people as that.
I will. For me, it's seeing increased polarization, in particular with inequality for people, rather than necessarily a shift towards things like poverty, and the ever-growing expanse of opinions on either side. In terms of what scares me most about what's asked of me at the moment, it's moving from research to action a lot of the time, when to pull the trigger.
Lovely, thank you. Anybody else feeling brave enough to share? Thank you for all of those who've put it in chat as well, by the way. Anybody else want to speak their fears? Barbara. You're on mute, my love.
Thank you. I'm thinking of something vague, and that is actually the fear. What's the fear is linked to the hugeness, right? When you get involved into wanting to make the world a better place or something romantic like that, it's humongous. The more we have power, and as leaders we often have quite a bit, the more you can see all of the differences that you can see. So the fear is being overwhelmed or feeling overwhelmed is my form of fear. And as a consequence, what I'm worried about is that I can't about what I'm expected to do by others, perhaps, and certainly by myself, is that I want to have like influence on everything, not necessarily directly, obviously, as a leader and directly, but it's just the hugeness of everything.
Lovely, thank you. A fear I really recognise, and what often goes for me with that is hand in hand with that is, am I going to therefore be good enough to tackle that? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else burning to speak? I'll take one more. Go for it, Dave.
Thanks. So I think what scares me is the influence that social media has on narrative, and who has control of that narrative through those channels. And in terms of what scares me about what I'm asked to do, if that was paraphrasing, I think what is my role in making the world a better place, and how can I live up to those expectations?
Lovely, thank you. And I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody, those that spoke them out loud, and those of you that put it in chat as well, and those of you who didn't feel that you wanted to say anything, but who nonetheless took up the exercise and just touched on fear. We've all got it. And what's lovely about this exercise, I think, is that it normalizes being fearful. Actually, we've all got fear, and we're still here showing up on our watch, trying to make it different, trying to make it better, I'd argue. So thank you. That's a really helpful exercise. And there's a whole body of work by a woman called Joanna Macy, called The Work That Reconnects, and it's all about how to deal with the world that without going crazy. So it's a lovely piece of work. You can do it as a free online course. There's a book, but it speaks very much to this bit about when it feels so huge and we feel so small. How do we actually, what framework could there possibly be for helping us navigate our way through it? And I would highly recommend that work to you. And I'm happy to I'll send these slides out, and I'll put on them, if people would find that useful, I'm happy to put on them links to Joanna's work. So can you all see my screen? In fact, let me just make sure I've got it on with sound, because I want to show you a short video, but I'm going to need to canter through the next bit really. So let me just check. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. I need it to move on now. Oh, it won't move. Okay, let me try it again a different way. Bear with me, colleagues, just for a second. I just need to do this a slightly different way, because it won't move on. Can you see my slides okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely. I'm going to talk very quickly about leading from purpose. And this is the bit, I think this is one of the most important parts of leadership, understanding your own purpose and then being able to articulate that well to others. And that helps you create followers. And there's a really lovely environmentalist and activist, Dougal Hind, as well as a poet. And he talks about this. Sometimes you're born into the ending of a world. The story you were born into doesn't have much further to run. The future no longer works. This is a thing that happens. It's happened to others before you. What moves are worth trying in such a time? First, as far as you can, stop trying to make sense according to the logic of the world that is ending. And there's a lovely invitation in that to invite in imagination, to stop serving something that really doesn't have a future, and to start to think about how do we create the future that we need to see. From that, there are 3 more questions that I'm going to invite you to just by yourselves to answer. And they are posed by a man called Mac McCartney, who is a systems change philosopher. He is I guess you'd call him a future generations leader. He's written a beautiful book called The Children's Fire, which is based on Indigenous wisdom, all about 7 generational decision making, or some of you might have heard about decision making like a tree, but it's basically making decisions for the future. And Wales have got a Future Generations Commissioner, for example. You know, this is not an unusual concept. It's not that typical, but it's not unusual even in you know, current day you know, public sector. The Future Generations Commissioner in Wales, for example, recently blocked the extension of the M4 on the basis that it would prejudice future generations of children and their health in terms of the pollution from the drift of the cars from the M4. So Matt McCartney does this whole thing about the children's fire and about us gathering around to make decisions that benefit children of the future that are yet to be born, human and non-human, actually. And he invites us to think about 3 questions when we're thinking about our purpose as leaders. And he invites you to do this at an initial level and then to go deeper. So he says, what is it that you most deeply and profoundly love? And for most people, the answer to that to start with is their family, or, you know, their kids, or, you know, their partner. He invites you to go beyond that and start thinking about, well, what about clean air or water or the planet? You know, like, take it to as deep a level as you can. Then he invites you to say, what are your deepest and most profound gifts? And most people shy away from this. You know, most of us don't want to think of ourselves as having gifts, but actually, what are your talents? What are your deepest and most profound gifts that you bring to the world? And then he invites you to see that in terms of responsibilities. So what are your deepest and most profound responsibilities? And again, the invitation is to go to another level. So most of us would say, for example, we might be responsible for our kids. But he says, yes, but what about the kids of your brother or your sister, you know, your nieces and nephews? Well, most of us might see some extension of responsibility to them. And he says, and what about the children of your neighbour, the children who live down the street? You know, do you have a responsibility to them when you're driving your car? And then what about the children who live in countries where perhaps decisions that our governments make might be prejudicing those children? You know, there's lots of examples of that around the world right now, where children are paying the price of kind of colonial decisions that have been made either now or historically, and are living less fortunate lives. So I just want to give you 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, to answer those 3 questions for yourself. I'm more than happy if you'd like to put them in chat, and hopefully there'll be a little bit of time at the end for us to just talk about anything that's sat with you from this. But this is an invitation for you, just for 2 minutes, to think about the answer to those questions for yourself. Okay, I'm gonna move on, but I'm gonna try and come back to that. I'm gonna try and give us enough time to come back to that. So, I want to talk about nurturing courage now for a moment, and these relate, like I was saying before, to the learning that we took from our work. So Brené Brown, whose work I'd really recommend, she's an academic, an American academic, but she's a very accessible academic. There's a Netflix film that she's done. She's done a series of podcasts. She's written books. She does a body of work all about dealing with human emotion, and it's very accessible. She talks about courage, and she says that the root of the word courage is cor, the Latin for heart. In one of its earliest forms, the word courage meant to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. Courage is a heart word. We need to be brave. And she says, just on that, actually, in her work, she said, in fact, that that the measure of how courageous people are is is directly related to how vulnerable they're prepared to make themselves or to let themselves be. And she talks about that true system leaders understand that they don't just risk failure, that they will fail, and they need to have the resilience and the courage to accept that in trying to change things for the better, you will fail. And it's that bit of learning is the bit that will help you get towards success. So she talks about the need to accept failure. Really interesting work, actually. I would really recommend it. And then she says here that experiencing vulnerability, and this was a bit about, risking vulnerability and courage. Experiencing vulnerability isn't a choice. The only choice we have is how we're going to respond when we're confronted with uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And this is the bit that as leaders, that inner change piece, this is what we really need to understand and embrace. We're going to be vulnerable. It's how we choose to respond when we are. That will mean we'll be able to play a part in transforming systems, or we'll be upholding the world as it currently is, to quote Adrienne Marie Brown. And there are 6 types of courage. There are physical courage, social courage. Physical courage is about, resilience, balance, awareness, keeping going, and it's the kind of thing, knight in a shining armor. Then there's social courage, to be ourselves unapologetically, and that's not easy, actually. Even today, I could feel the pressure in me to be embarrassed about my dog barking, to explain to you why I've got the dog in the room in the first place. Even when I know about social courage, and I'm trying to channel being myself unapologetically, even today I could feel myself wanting to explain to you or apologize to you. We all do it. Actually we all do it. Moral courage, doing the right thing even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. How many times have you sat in a meeting and thought, I'm going to have to object to this, but it's going to be me again that's saying yes but, and that feeling of, do I say something or do I just go with the flow? Emotional courage, feeling all of your emotions, positive and negative, without guilt or attachment. This is quite a difficult one. I get asked most questions about this, but it's the idea that you would let yourself cry if you're sad, you'd let yourself rage if you're angry, you'd let yourself, throw your head back and laugh if you're feeling joy, and you wouldn't attach guilt to any of that. I'm sorry I'm crying. How many times have we all said that? Or I'm sorry I got angry with you. Or actually held on to some of those emotions. And kind of use them as almost like as a shield from dealing with things. Intellectual courage is the courage to learn, unlearn, and relearn with an open and flexible mind. How many of us go into meetings assuming that we're going to know the answers to things? And then spiritual courage, to live with purpose and meaning through a heart-centered approach to life, all life and oneself. That idea that we understand that everything's connected, and we understand our connection and responsibilities, therefore, to it. So 6 different types of courage. And what I'm going to invite you to have a think about is, and you can draw this, you can literally draw this if you want to, is a little courage map. Where would you rate yourself if the center is I've got no skills is 0, and if the end of the star shape for each one of these is 5, I've completely nailed this, I've got all of it. Where would you put yourself on these axes for each of these different types of courage? You could put a little cross. If you want to draw this, you can put a little cross on it, and then you can join up your cross to see what your courage shape looks like. And I'll just whiz back a slide so that you can see the definitions of them again, just to remind you. And then if you want to, I'll just pause for a minute here, and you can have a quick go at looking at what your courage map might look like. Where are you on physical courage? And that bit about keeping going with resilience. Where are you on moral courage, being prepared to say unpopular things? Where are you on your spiritual courage? So that bit about living with purpose. Where are you on emotional courage? So letting your feelings pass through you without attachment or guilt. Where are you on social courage? Being yourself unapologetically. And where are you on intellectual courage? That bit about being prepared to learn, relearn, and unlearn. So I will send this to Kate and others so that you can have a copy of this if you want to. So if you don't get the time to finish this, but you are interested, you'll get this slide. Finally, it was about how we the practices that we need to use as system leaders, and how we deliver them. So for those of you, again, as old as me, you won't be able to hear these lyrics without thinking of the band and the song. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it, and that's what gets the results. So there is something about the way that you do the work. It's not just the work. And if you're as old as me, you can't read that without singing it in your head and hearing the tune. I apologise to the youngsters of you. This quote is so good I've put it in twice, and that's not a coincidence. I invite you to think about this again now as we've gone through these slides. You're always practicing something. You are either practicing upholding the world as it is, or you are practicing shifting into the world as you want it to be. What's beautiful about that quote is the invitation for agency. It's up to us whether we carry on doing things the way they've always been done, or whether we decide to step into the way that things need to be done differently. And like I say, I use this as a philosophy every day. If I've got, if I'm double booked, which of those meetings is going to get me into the future? If that's the criteria I can use, I will. I am 55. Why am I telling you that? I hear you think. I've realised, I realised this before 55, but it's definitely, I definitely feel it now. I've got more of my life behind me than in front of me. And this quotation from Annie Dillard pulled me up short. I want to talk about the photograph first, because this is the process of interior change, okay? And you can apply this to, stopping drinking in the week. You can apply this to eating better. You can apply this to sport. You can apply this to, anything personal. You can also apply this to how you spend your professional life, to things that you decide to do in your career. First, it's an intention. So I intend to do things differently. Then the behavior comes. I am doing things differently. Then it's a habit. I've got used to doing things differently. Then it's a practice. This is what I do. Then it's second nature. It becomes who I'm being. And then it simply is who you are. And that's for me, that's a really lovely demonstration of how you change as a person. And Annie Dillard says that it's really important that we have this in our minds, because how we spend our days, that collection of our days, is of course how we live our lives. And at 55, the realization that how I have spent all my days will be how I look back at how I lived my life. This quote pulled me up short. Like, I realize now that I need to crack on. I haven't got as long in front of me as I've had behind me. Time is of the essence, and it's the most valuable asset I have. So how I spend my days is how I've lived my life. If I'm not bringing in the future, what the hell am I doing then as a system leader trying to make transformative change? And now I'd just like to show you a video. And the invitation on this video is to ask you to see where you notice courage. Okay, it's a 5-minute video. There should be 5 minutes left at the end for us to talk this through. I'm going to ask you as well to tell me, did you all hear and can you all see that?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to put the captions on. I think they are on actually. And I'm just going to ask you to spend 3 minutes, in fact, enjoying this video.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious.
Oops, sorry.
And the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
Oh, let me get out of that. So, my question to you, and then the opportunity for us to open this out, I guess, is where in that video did you see courage? Anybody want to start? Everywhere, yeah. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Barbara? Why do you think everywhere?
Because, I mean, the questions we've heard were all at some point, at some level, tapping into different types and levels of vulnerability, and which also is subjective anyway. And they were in front of strangers saying something personal, and some of them could have felt light-hearted, like, the dancers, that's not difficult to admit you're a dancer, but maybe it's difficult to admit you're a dancer in front of a disabled person. So even the ones that for most of us would be, yeah, it's a thing, I'll go and join that group. Everything is so relative, and vulnerability. And so yes, we are supposed to say that one single transsexual person, I loved the way they pointed out the clapping of the other people.
Yeah.
I thought it was really well done. But yeah, they've all shown vulnerability in different ways, and so that's courageous.
Lovely. Thanks, Barbara. Spot on. Great answer. Kate, what do you want to say?
Well, I just had to respond immediately to Barbara, because anybody who knows me, who's heard me talk about myself a bit at LGE and other spaces, is I'm a disabled dancer. So that's an interesting one to respond immediately to. And I've not been to Denmark, so I can't comment on that particular identifier, but I agree that demonstrated a lot of courage in terms of othering yourself from potentially the audience who didn't agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Brilliant points. Anybody want to say anything else, or anybody got any other questions? That concludes my presentation, I guess. I wanted to kind of share with you some of our learning and talk a little bit about what motivates me. But anybody got any other comments? Feel free to put your cameras back on now if you want to. Unmute your mics. We've got 6 minutes. So plenty of time to have a bit of a chat.
I might call that 5 and 30 seconds because I need a tiny bit at the end.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's say 5 minutes then. 5 minutes. Who'd like to say stuff? I'm going to shush now. All comments are welcome. I've stunned you all into silence. Come on. Be courageous. What do you want to say?
Ask about that bit. I have a bit of problem with unapologetically yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just expand a bit more on that? Because in my head is like, it's kind of authenticity, being authentic. But at the same time, I just feel that if everybody wanted to now just be unapologetically, that like, where is the middle point of us kind of being in the same space? Because it will be kind of anarchy. So as much as I would want to kind of, I actually agree with you, it would be good, but then, I've had to adapt quite a lot to change myself to fit in this society. So I just feel like that doesn't quite, make sense anymore, or that is too much paradoxes in my head.
Sure. I think there's a difference between allowing ourselves to be all of the things that we might be without any boundaries on them. There's a difference between that and being apologetic for just being yourself. So do you see what I mean? So it's not saying that we can't put boundaries on our behavior, but it is saying, actually, why would we apologize just for the way that we are? And that's the bit about, I turned up once, recently, to deliver a presentation similar to this, where I was showing those types of courage, and I apologized for my outfit because I'd come from another thing, and I thought where I needed to be dressed more formally. And I remember the woman who was arranging it saying to me, "Oh, you look fine, Karen, don't worry about it." And I used that as an example later on about being myself unapologetically, because I'd been busy all day. Why was I apologising for turning up in clothes? Do you know what I mean? But I felt like I hadn't quite got there. Obviously I don't walk around naked normally, but do you know what I mean? It's kind of, my point was, I was apologising to them for meeting a standard they hadn't asked me to meet. So that's the bit, really. It's about apologising for being us, for being a better ally to ourselves, really, to allow ourselves the space to be us. That doesn't mean everything about us should be unfettered. There might be things that we might want to temper in terms of our behaviour. That's different, though, to apologising simply for being ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. Anna, go for it. Unmute and jump in.
Hi, and I just wanted to say thank you so much, Karen. Obviously, I've worked alongside Karen, so I wanted to say to people I've had the pleasure of working alongside Karen, and she really does live and breathe these values. So it's part of the Pedal Power program. So yeah, I just really wanted to reinforce it. It's really, it was really, I guess, not a baptism of fire, but really refreshing to work alongside somebody that is so different in terms of some of our government values. And I've been working for Essex County Council for 18 years. So actually seeing you sort of this amazing, bright, and, you live and breathe everything that you're saying. So I just really wanted to reinforce that and say it's been really amazing seeing that and seeing it unfold and what we've managed to achieve actually in some of our most deprived communities. So yeah, thank you. I've been taking copious notes, but yeah, just to say this is you, and it's amazing.
That's really lovely. And can I just credit you back, because I don't think Essex Pedal Power would have existed if it wasn't for your tenacity and the way that you birthed it. Because if it wasn't for you, it would never have happened. So hats off to you. You inspire me. So thank you. I can't see your name, but number one. Oh, Natasha. I've hovered over you. Natasha, hello. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I was just conscious about the quote, and forgive me, I didn't get down who wrote it, but systems don't change unless they're put under undue pressure. I just wanted to pause on that for a minute. Now, we are going through a massive period of change, and without putting too fine a point on it, some of the folk, some of the time, who are very senior or leading a change, their drive for change can be despite the people around them. So they don't take them on the journey, and therefore they don't get the buy-in. But also it's not relative to the resources that actually a pragmatist would say you can't do 20 things because you've actually, you will want to do all 20 things, but you can't do all 20 things like today. And of course you need to plan and make sure you need to do something, because I always say to my team, we need to take action. So it's not about not taking action, it's just about tempering it. When you have somebody who is and just thinking about when you've, because I actually subscribe to that point that you do need to put pressure on a system to make it change, but not to the point that it breaks people.
No, I quite agree.
And how I just wanted to pause on that and think how we can temper ourselves as much as tempering our behavior when we're being, I get what you mean about apologizing for yourself, but also there's a line. I absolutely agree that a system needs pressure to be able to change, because otherwise everyone's just like, oh, we're just doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. A system, putting pressure on a system shouldn't break people. I do. It was Helen Gould from the Young Foundation that said that, and she's talking about system shift So she's kind of talking about the need to kind of she does talk about forcing systems to shift. I think though, there's a really good video called if you Google half naked dancing guy, it's all about creating a flock. So how you bring people with you. It's really a leadership lesson in followership. And I would argue that if you're going to create effective system change, you need to create followers. And there's this video, it's on YouTube. Honestly, if you type in half naked dancing guy leadership, it'll come up. Nothing dodgy will come up.
I'm there, yeah.
And it's
not now, but
we can add it into what we share afterwards, Karen.
Lovely. Well, it's 3 or 4 minutes, and it's basically
I think I know him.
A guy at a festival who gets people dancing, but it's a lovely lesson in how to bring people with you, and that's what you have to do in system change. Yes, you have to put pressure on a system, but within that system are a group of individuals, and you have to work out how to create followers. Otherwise, nothing will change. Absolutely, great question.
That is a great place to leave it. Thank you, Karen, because I'm actually working on the 2025 program for LGE+Unplugged right now, and I'm actually breaching some of my various compartments of my life, my personal life, my professional life, my voluntary sector life, and I'm inviting somebody in who, if I get them, is going to be a very exciting representative of the music industry, talking to us about complexity in that space. And he won't be coming naked or dancing, but he will be telling us some stuff that I hope that the audience here and others will be interested to hear, just as you have been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Karen, and bringing us back to Myron's maxims, which were very strongly rooted in the original LGE space. I think perhaps they've not been taught as vociferously as they used to be, so I will be actually revisiting that to make sure that in the 2025 programme we hear about them again very clearly, because they're certainly written through me like a stick of rock. And I'd like to advertise that our next LGE+Unplugged session, our December one, is actually much earlier in the month than usually because of Christmas and other festival celebrations at the end of the month. So it'll be on the 16th, where we're hearing from Ndunge Kavutiu, who used to be part of the system and was one of our alumni, and she's now at the University of Cambridge as a lead for a complex system there. So once again, thank you so much, Karen. If you could send us the slides so we can share them alongside this recording, I'd be very grateful. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And if anybody has any further suggestions as who you'd like to see, Karen, including your recommendations as to who you would like to hear from if you were one of our LGE Plus members, please put your answers on a postcard to me and I will try and get people booked in for the 2025 programme for you. So thanks again, everybody, and farewell.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.